This film tells the story of a mad scientist who is obsessed with snakes. His obsession is so extreme that he wants to turn humans into snakes. After conducting various experiments, he eventually creates a serum that can transform humans into snakes. To test it, he injects it into his assistant while saying, "Don't worry, this is just an antidote that will prevent any virus from entering your body." However, the assistant is unaware that the scientist is lying to him. As time passes, his condition begins to change. His skin starts peeling off, revealing snake scales on his body. The lower half of his body transforms into a snake, while the upper half remains human. With this transformation, he loses many human abilities, such as speaking, walking, and even the ability to tell anyone about his suffering. Seeing this condition, the scientist takes advantage of his assistant's weakness and sells him to a circus show. Using the money from the sale, he plans another experiment. This time, instead of only transforming his assistant halfway into a snake, he intends to turn a human completely into a snake. People at the circus come from all over to witness this strange creature, half human and half snake, unaware that it is the result of a failed experiment conducted by a mad scientist. Then, the scientist is seen searching for a new victim for his next experiment. He meets a fellow professor and says, "I need a new assistant. My previous one resigned." The scientist explains that he is working on a new experiment and needs help. His friend asks for details about the experiment, but the scientist doesn't respond. Instead, his friend introduces a young man named David, who is very interested in science. David is looking for a part-time job since he is a college student, and he plans to gain experience, believing that working with a scientist would be highly beneficial. David is excited about his new job. Without asking too many questions, he follows the scientist to his laboratory. On his first day, the scientist introduces him to the snakes he owns. David notices that the scientist has categorized the snakes with different labels. A red label indicates highly venomous snakes. If one bites, the victim will die instantly. A green label means the snake is non-venomous. A yellow label signifies a venomous snake, but there are ways to treat the bite. The scientist says, "Don't worry, I have antidotes for all of these snakes' venoms. Even for the highly venomous mamba, I have the antidote. Just for your information, a single drop of mamba venom is enough to kill 10 people. If this snake bites, the person can die within an hour, and they won't even realize they've been bitten. Before dying, they'll feel like they're having a heart attack." The scientist also teaches David how to extract venom from the snakes. After hearing the explanation, David asks, "What exactly am I supposed to do here?" Before answering, the scientist says, "Your role will become clear soon. First, I'm going to inject you with something. Don't worry, it's just an antidote to protect you in case a snake bites you here, so at least your life won't be at risk." David agrees and accepts the injection, without suspecting that this could actually be an experiment. In the movie, it's revealed that the serum injected into David is made from cobra genes. Typically, if a cobra bites an ordinary person, they wouldn't survive. After the injection, the scientist and David chat for a while, and soon it's time for dinner. By the way, David will be staying at the scientist's house. During dinner, David suddenly feels unwell. He starts experiencing a severe headache. The scientist tells David not to worry, saying it's just a side effect of the serum. The scientist's daughter takes David to his room to rest, and that night, David has strange dreams. He hallucinates about snakes, and not only that, but he also feels extremely hot. However, he eventually falls into a deep sleep until the early morning. The next morning, David hears the sound of a crowd outside the house. When he steps out, he sees many people gathered outside, there to watch the scientist's performance, where the scientist will extract venom from a cobra without any protection. The scientist is very skilled at this, but every time he performs the task, he is extremely cautious, knowing that one small mistake could cost him his life. Among the crowd, there is a photographer taking pictures. As soon as the photographer takes a photo of the cobra, the flash from the camera startles the snake, causing it to become angry. In its rage, the cobra nearly attacks the scientist, but fortunately, the scientist manages to escape and subdue the cobra. In the end, he successfully captures the cobra and extracts its venom. The crowd cheers and throws money in appreciation of the performance. With this money, once again, the scientist plans to continue his experiments, but over time, the funds begin to dwindle. A few days later, we see that David's skin starts peeling. Naturally, this terrifies David. When David asks the scientist about what's happening to him, the scientist reassures him, saying that it's just a side effect of the serum. The scientist even helps David peel his skin. He explains that the peeling is a good sign, as it indicates the serum is working smoothly. David then mentions that he now prefers cold weather and doesn't like being in warm places, but despite this, the scientist insists, no matter what, you should always wear a jacket. Meanwhile, the police arrive at the scientist's house. They are actually searching for the scientist's missing assistant and investigating both his home and laboratory. The scientist allows the police to enter because he knows they won't find any evidence there. As they enter the lab, the police see the scientist's daughter observing a large python. When she moves the snake to another room, the police even help her. After searching and finding nothing, the police eventually leave. As time goes on, this mad scientist continues to inject David with the serum every day, and David never questions why this is happening to him. Fast forward 1 month, and David begins to have hallucinations about snakes, but he continues working in the lab. He starts developing feelings for the scientist's daughter, Christina, and it seems Christina might feel the same way. The two of them travel to another city to buy some snakes. On their way back, they stop to watch a circus performance, which also features a snake show. They hear about a creature that is half human and half snake. Christina doesn't like the sound of it and isn't interested in seeing it, but David is curious. He buys a ticket and goes inside, where he sees the scientist's former assistant, who turns out to be David's senior from college. When the assistant spots David, he immediately recognizes him. He wants to tell David that it was the scientist, David's boss, who caused all of this to happen to him, but unfortunately, he can't speak. Although the assistant recognizes David, David ignores him and leaves. Outside, David notices a man harassing Christina. Christina tells David about it, and David immediately confronts the man. However, the man is much stronger than David and nearly defeats him. Suddenly, David's blood begins to boil, and oddly enough, he starts behaving like a snake, as if there is a snake inside him. Like a normal snake, he attempts to bite the man, perceiving him as his enemy. Of course, since David is still human, he doesn't actually harm the man. Shortly after, the police arrive to handle the situation, allowing Christina and David to return home safely. However, the man who fought with David doesn't forget the confrontation. He plans his revenge and secretly follows them, eventually arriving at Christina's house. Late at night, he attempts to sneak into Christina's room, but just before he can enter, a snake suddenly wraps around his arm. It's Christina's pet snake. Panicking, the man struggles to free himself and ends up killing the snake. When David, the scientist, and Christina hear the commotion and rush to the scene, they find the snake dead. The man grabs half of the snake's body and leaves, shouting insults at them. Christina is devastated by the loss of her pet, and her father, the scientist, is also deeply affected. Wanting revenge on the man, the scientist takes the most venomous snake from his lab and sneaks into the man's house. Quietly, he releases the snake in the man's bedroom. While the man is showering, the snake bites him. As expected, after being bitten by the deadliest snake, the man dies, and the scientist's revenge is complete. After that, the scientist returned home with the snake that had carried out his revenge. At home, he noticed that Christina and David were getting closer. Realizing this, he felt disappointed and immediately scolded Christina. Christina was bewildered, as her father had never reacted this way before. "So why now?" Her father said, "I can't explain everything. All I can say is you must stay away from David and do as I say." Eventually, the scientist locked David in a room near his lab, a room without mirrors. Suddenly, something strange started happening to David. His skin color began to change, his face morphed, and snake scales appeared on his body. It was clear that the scientist's experiment was working. Meanwhile, Christina wanted to see David, but her father stopped her, saying that David was sick and the serum was having negative side effects on him. However, when Christina insisted on seeing David, her father sent her to another city to buy more snakes. Afterward, the scientist returned to David and gave him something to drink, claiming it would help him recover. The scientist said, "Drink this, and you'll feel better." Without thinking, David drank it, but after drinking, he started experiencing excruciating stomach pain. He felt as if all his internal organs were shrinking. David begged the scientist to take him to the hospital, but the scientist refused, saying, "No, I'll give you an injection, and you'll be fine." Before the scientist could administer the injection, they heard a car pull up outside the house. It was one of David's professors, who had come looking for him. David had been missing his college classes for a long time, and now the professor was suspicious that the scientist might be behind it, especially since another senior student had also disappeared. When the professor arrived, the scientist went out to meet him. The professor said, "I want to see David," but the scientist refused, saying that David was unwell. The professor, feeling suspicious, left, but secretly snuck back into the scientist's lab, where he saw that David had fully transformed into a snake. David tried to speak to him, to ask for help, but now that he had become a snake, he could no longer talk. Meanwhile, the scientist was watching from a distance. He knew that if the professor left, all his secrets would be exposed. So, the scientist attacked him from behind and dragged him into the lab, where he allowed his most dangerous snakes to bite the professor until he died. After his death, the scientist received a call from Christina, who said, "I've arrived at the pet store, but there are no snakes ordered under our name." The snakes weren't there because her father, the scientist, had never ordered anything. The scientist made an excuse, saying, "Wait there for a bit, the delivery might be delayed." Christina, though puzzled, agreed but wondered why it was taking so long. The pet store owner then suggested Christina visit a nearby circus. They also have a snake show there, maybe you can find some snakes. He mentioned to Christina that there was a strange creature at the circus, half human, half snake. Christina had heard about this before. Without wasting time, she decided to go to the circus. However, when Christina arrived at the circus, she found that it had already closed, but her curiosity to see the snake remained. So, she quietly snuck into the snake storage area, and there she saw her father's first assistant, who had now become a strange creature due to the experiment, half snake, half human. Christina recognized the man and quickly realized that all of this was her father's doing. She understood that her father sending her to another city was just part of his psychopathic plan, and now David's life was also in danger. Determined to save David, Christina hurried back home without wasting any time. Then, we are shown that the wife of the man who was killed by the scientist goes to the police station to report the incident. She tells the police that her husband had killed the scientist's pet snake, and she is certain that the scientist murdered her husband in revenge. The police begin to take action. They also receive another report about the scientist. This time, the family of the missing professor informs them that the professor was last seen going to the scientist's house and never returned. Before that, the scientist had an assistant, and now both the assistant and a student haven't been seen attending classes. After receiving so many reports, the police decide to investigate and head straight to the scientist's house. In the lab, the scientist is in the middle of experimenting on David. He places David on a stretcher and gives him another injection. David's body has already transformed into a snake, but after this injection, even more changes occur. Suddenly, his mouth shrinks into that of a snake, and his legs turn into a tail, making him a full cobra. Seeing this, the scientist is overjoyed, his experiment has succeeded. Then, in a bizarre turn of events, the scientist pits a real cobra against the cobra created from David's body. The scientist delights in watching this fight, but how long can this enjoyment last? As we know, evil deeds always have consequences. True enough, in his carelessness, the real cobra bites the scientist, and he dies instantly from the venom. At the same time, Christina arrives. She sees her father dying and screams for help. Her cries attract the cobra's attention, which is about to attack her. However, before the cobra can kill her, the police arrive just in time to save Christina and apprehend the scientist. Meanwhile, inside the lab, we see that David, now transformed into a cobra, is battling Nahola, Christina's pet mongoose. The mongoose shows no mercy and attacks David. Christina, witnessing this horrifying scene, tries to intervene, but tragically, David Cobra loses the fight to the mongoose. And with that, the film comes to an end. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you again in the next video.